good evening and welcome everyone to the Lents Neighborhood Livability Association. Thank you for joining us. A couple of announcements. We have weekly West Rock cleanups Saturday mornings, so the 16th, 23rd, and 30th from 8 to roughly 9 a.m. If the weather changes though, check Facebook because it is subject to change, either if it gets too hot or too wet or whatever. Next month, August 2nd, is going to be National Night Out here at the church property out on this side of the church. From 5 to 7:30. And that's basically it. We have our little, just kind of a set of rules here. Once we're done here, I step away and let our guests run the meeting. So if they'll give their presentation. If you have questions, raise your hand and they'll call on you. Try to give everyone a chance to ask their questions. Try not to run out, take over the meeting. Anyway, so is Keith going to go first then? Chris is going to go.
Can we wait a couple minutes?
Yeah, because Chris said he may run a little late. He had some project he was working on. He said that he needed to get done, but I don't know.
Let me call him real quick and see what his timing is. And then if he's going to run later, then I'll speak. And then he really wanted to be
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they can enjoy our lovely video I made years ago, because it's changed so much.
Yeah. It's been so long since I've seen it, so it looks like
sarcasm,
it's...
No, there wouldn't be any there.
When did you make this?
When did I make it? Probably 4 years ago.
The date just came up. Was
Well, I know those pictures are from that date, but when I made it,
probably in 2018, not much after.
yeah. So there's food over there for everyone if you're hungry. And there's lemonade.
Hey, Chris, Keith Wilson. How are you doing, sir? Keith Wilson, you and I are presenting at the LNLA tonight. Hey, I was just checking your timing. What time do you think you'll get here? Oh, fantastic. No problem at all. I just really wanted to hear you before I go and really kind of get a bird's eye view of what you're experiencing. So we're all set to go. Just come on in and we'll get going, okay? Right on, Chris. Thank you. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
He's a fireman. He should be here in 2 minutes, right?
Chris and our firefighters have really experienced a lot.
Oh, I know
the
they
changing in our society. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what I've done ride-alongs downtown, and he's invited me to do ride-alongs down here.
Oh, okay.
And good. And he'll really talk about the amount of calls, the emergent calls. Emergent calls focused on homeless is based on what a friend and I did. Right, about 90% of their efforts are focused towards homeless versus fire and rescue now. So
yeah, that's what the whole problem is. We're losing that rescue vehicle. The little one. I just hope he gives us some names and numbers to call.
No one knew that those weren't new pictures.
Oh, I know. No, it hasn't changed much at all. I think the only difference under the bridge now is it was flooded out.
Yeah. Spring cleaning.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be back.
Now I have to check under the commissioner.
I think the last time we came up with was good.
So many places.
What's happening
I
out
think we
there?
have some people that are looking for the meeting probably.
Oh, no, really?
I went that way too for.
Oh, no. I'll go get them. Because I don't think this window opens.
Can we? Oh, yeah, they're already.
Hey folks,
Oh, there.
Chris,
sorry I'm late.
no problem. Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
We're just glad to see you.
yeah, doing my best.
Are you looking for the LNLA?
Rescuing.
Oh, okay, maybe not.
In this area, it's not until nighttime. Keith, I'm Chris Starling. Nice to meet you. How are you? Hey, I got some handouts for you folks. And I'm sure you guys can all understand, we are out of service for this meeting. Unless someone's stuff catches on fire, then we're going to leave. I think that you guys can all probably appreciate that. All right. So what I'm handing out to you is, I'm just going to, here, actually, you guys can just, I'll take one. No, I have one. I'll give one. I'm just going to jump right in unless you guys need me to wait.
No,
Go right
you're
ahead.
good. You're late.
Yeah, I am.
The meeting yours.
So, for those that don't know me, my name is Chris Starling. I'm the captain of your fire station right down there on 92nd Avenue, just north of Foster Road. Put it into perspective, I've been at this station for 6 years. Portland Fire has 31 stations. There's only 3 other captains that have been at their stations longer than me. So captains have a tendency to be a little nomadic and get moved around for various reasons. The difference between me and the other 3 guys that have been at their stations longer is that you can take the call volume of those 3 stations combined, and it does not equal my station every single year. So they're at very easy rusting stations, and we're out here doing the work. So again, I'm Chris Starling, I'm Station 11, A shift. In the back with the gentleman with the hat with the Ned Flanders mustache, that is going to be Brian Ferris. He's one of my firefighters. And then you got Matt Smith, and he's at Station 29, which is down to the east off of Foster on 130th Avenue. Good house. So one of the things that I would like to talk to you guys about tonight is I gave you the memo that our department put out on the budget that the mayor adopted, and I don't know if you guys all follow what the budget process goes through every year. The reason that this one is actually beneficial to us this go round, excuse me, is that this is the first time in years that Portland Fire has not had to sustain a cut. That sounds great in one way, but you need to understand that when you sustain cuts year after year after year, eventually that gets to the point where what is it that you want to cut off, you need more. And we reached to the point where we were actually down to what stations does Portland Fire want to close. And there are no good choices when we're faced with that. And so last year was the first time that they said, okay, hold on, we'll just give you the same amount to get going one more year, and hopefully this year will be better. And even though the economy seems to be trending in the wrong direction, we're actually given additional resources to grow a little bit. So that is good news. And how does that impact the people of Lents and this homeowner association? I will go through this a little bit, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, my station is staffed with 1 engine that has 4 people, and on the list in the back with the numbers, you'll see it says E11, that's us, that's you, that's your neighborhood. And then down the list a little further, I've underlined R11, that's Rescue 11. That is a 2-person apparatus, and the purpose of the rescues is that they're supposed to take the low acuity calls. The low acuity call is a call that is not quite life-threatening, kind of not important, a call that can wait for people to get there maybe a little bit longer, if you will. Yeah. Picking people up, people calling for smoke in the area, smoke detectors going off, those kind of things. Medical alarm pendants, I'm sure you guys know what those are from family members. So that's the primary role of the rescue. But our rescue's been hit and miss in that because of staffing issues that our rescue, your rescue has been closed almost 30 times this year so far. And what does that mean for you? It means that when that rescue's not there and a call that comes in this area, that rescue's not available, that means that defaults to the engine. The engine is with the 4 people, the pump, the water, the stuff that actually puts the fires out when those come in. Well, if we're taking the low acuity calls because the rescue's not here, then when you call, the next available units are going to be coming from farther away, which is longer response times and higher increase of mortality and fatality and all the other stuff. In other words, the longer it takes to get there, the worse things become. That kind of sounds doom and gloom, but honestly, that's how we've been doing business for a long time, and it's a little frustrating. And so, for me, I've been advocating on your behalf for a number of years, and I have to be careful with how I conduct business because I'm a very direct person, and I have a tendency not to sugarcoat the truth, and sometimes that hurts people's feelings. So going through this here, you'll notice that the budget is now $170 million for Portland Fire. And that seems like a lot of money, but if you really think about it, we have athletes that make that in 5 years now. Isn't that crazy? So that's an increase, and it'll say on there, you see it says that 33 FTE, that means full-time employees. That's 33 additional firefighters that are coming online, and they will be in our ranks, we're estimating probably around November. That's an increase. I shouldn't say that's an increase, it's an adding of 33 people, but that also means that through attrition of the people, by the time that they come out, because it takes about a year from the time that we hire somebody to the time that we turn them loose in the bureau to go do the job, it takes about a year to do that. There's usually a loss of personnel in the process. So with that being said, out of the 33, about 15 will actually backfill attrition. So we're growing maybe 15 people. And so when you count in people that sustain injuries that end their career, people that retire, believe it or not, there are people that just quit. It's kind of hard for me to fathom because I really love this job. But the growth is minimal, but the key word there is that it is growth. And even though it is very small, it's way better than it has been the previous years. The previous years, the word has always been, what are we going to cut? And I remember I talked about that earlier. So this is actually really good news for us, even though it's just a little bit. And then if you look down there, it goes into some other programs, and it talks about some of the things that they're looking at, like a wildland fire coordinator, Portland Street response, and some other public safety staff. How does that affect Lents? The wildland coordinator, it not so much, but what that does is you have to understand that when we are able to deploy our Portland resources, not just Lents, but Portland resources to any kind of wildland fire, whether it be locally, Central Oregon, California, the federal government writes out a big fat check, and Portland makes a profit off of sending us on deployments. The earning potential is gigantic, and there are a lot of departments out there like Clackamas and Tualatin Valley that identified that years ago, and they have adjusted their operating to accommodate certain apparatus and certain people that they can go because it makes money for their department and for their city. Portland Fire is not even close to accomplishing that. The only time that we're realistically able to deploy people is if we don't have staffing problems. And I don't know if you know this, but we have staffing problems and we end up closing units to try to make ends meet. But this is a step in the right direction. It costs money to make money, and this is the first step in Portland starting to identify that we need to start building a wildland team, if you will. And yes, it will send resources outside of Portland, but we will get that. Usually the paycheck comes almost a year later once we settle all down, but that actually improves the fire department that serves your city and your area. Portland Street Response and Chat. Have you guys heard about that? Have you guys seen the news and the politicians kind of hanging their hat on that program? The difference between Portland Street Response and Chat is this. Portland Street Response deals mostly with people that are having mental health crisis. The people that we go on 100 times a year. Yeah, that's a real thing. And they're the people that just don't know what to do, and nobody knows what to do with them. Do they need to go to the hospital? No. But that's what this organization, this part of the organization is meant to do. They're trying to help them coordinate other resources, other agencies to help manage the people so they stop calling and that they stop using the inappropriate resources such as the emergency rooms. Chat is what's called the Community Health and Assessment Team. They're 2-person teams, and they're riding around in our red ambulance that we used to have because we have a brush unit now. And the other part of that is that they go and help the low acuity stuff. So when my rescue is closed, hopefully chat will backfill that a little bit. And they do sometimes, but chat is now citywide. It used to be just Portland. They did the pilot project there in Portland, and now it's throughout the city. It has mixed success because they have banker's hours currently, and that's because that's all we can afford to pay right now. I mean, we don't have the money just yet to have that staffing to go 24 hours. The other thing is that most of the people that are in chat have very limited experience. So even though they're going on those calls, it's no different than hiring you folks saying, okay, we're going to put you on chat, go. And so we get people that are out there like, so what are we supposed to do? It's a program that we're learning as we go. It has some really good potential to help, but we have to be careful on how we progress because the funding is limited. And most of the funding does not come out of Portland Fire's budget. It comes through other grants and funding like CARES Oregon. And right now it's a 2-year limit. And so, go ahead, Charlie.
I'm just curious, I get all kinds of newsletters and all this stuff. I've never heard of this program.
Which one? Chat? Chat?
When did they start it?
Remember about, year and a half, probably about a year and a half ago or so, that I had talked to you about, hey, this is coming. You're like, what is that about? And I said, it's another resource that's coming to help. And primarily, it was originally to help focus on a lot of the homeless folks that are calling 911 for various reasons.
So did they publish that information? I mean, I didn't see it one last week. I didn't see it in the Tribune. I didn't see it in the
Actually, and I'm not calling you out, but it's been on the news.
Really?
And,
Oh,
my goodness, it's the PR spin it is really fun to watch because it's like watching a commercial when they bring out a nice hamburger from like Carl's Jr. It looks fantastic, and you go order it, and you're like, it looks nothing like it does on TV. Chat and PSR are kind of similar.
Okay.
Here's what they're saying they're going to do, and here's what they're actually accomplishing.
Well, PSR is trained. They have degrees of some kind, right? PSR.
Some.
Most of them.
Some.
Kind of.
Some.
Some.
Let's just leave it at some.
Okay, something. Okay.
Yeah.
Do each of the fire stations still have paramedic units, people that are paramedics within firefighting? And do they work with this team?
So PSR is mostly based off of the mental health aspect, and so there is a sprinkling of a couple of paramedics in those teams, but most of the people that work for Portland Street Response are kind of mental health coordinators, social workers, and people of that type of category. So they're not really firefighters and paramedics going out on those calls. Chat, on the other hand, is a mix of EMT basics and paramedics going out on those calls. So for example, there are a number of retired firefighters that are actually applying to come back into the chat program. And we look at that's a positive thing because the learning curve for them is going to be much easier and lower because they already have the experience of managing some of these people and the systems that they're going to be working with.
I would think like with wound care and that kind of thing that they would need to have somebody that knew medical treatment. And
so when it comes to things like wound care and the medical problems that they go on, they have to be dispatched with the knowledge of, again, low acuity. Like, I got a cut on my hand, and people that fell, it's like my leg hurts kind of thing. If it's anything, if there are certain things that they say when they call, like, hey, I'm having a hard time breathing or my chest kind of hurts, that does not go to them. It comes back to us because that's considered a high acuity call. And so a high acuity call is something that can be deemed more of a detrimental to your health or life-threatening. But then that goes back to, it has to rely on the people that are calling to give the accurate information.
So how is chat deployed?
So chat runs just like we do. They have what's called an MDC, a mobile data computer. You ever pull up next to a police officer, you see the computer in the car. They all have that. They all have the same radios that we do. and they have AVL, which little, Big Brother can track where they're at. So when a call comes in, it dispatches the closest one to them. And then they run a call just like we would. They, hey, we've arrived. They take care of the problem or the person or the medical need or whatever they need. And then when they're done, then they clear it, and then they go on to whatever next call comes around. So it's dispatched just like we are. We hear them on the radio all the time. So
What kind of rig do they run?
so there's three different types of apparatus. So Portland Street Response runs around in those white city cars, and some of them are the like little vans that kind of look like you'd see like a delivery driver would bring around. The chat side of it, they drive around in the ambulances. They have 2 box ambulances. And I don't know if you've ever come to my station. We used to have them. It looks just like it. Well, it is an ambulance. It's just not licensed and outfitted properly to transport. And the other one is they drive around the Tahoes, just 4-door Tahoes. All right. Go
Can you
ahead.
call and request chat specifically, or does that
Absolutely.
happen? You can.
Yeah, people do all the time. So it's interesting to say that because once certain facilities and certain neighborhoods and certain agencies are aware of that, they will call specifically for the shooter response or for chat.
Right.
Yeah,
Do you just do that for non-emergency, or does it need to be 911?
whatever. I like saying non-emergency, but
Okay.
at the end of the day, it doesn't seem to really matter. There's a number of calls that go through one channel and end up in the emergency side, and all the ones that come in through the emergency side stay on the emergency side. So
Gotcha.
it's an interesting matrix that they have up there.
Okay.
Can you give us like some examples of what they deal with? I mean, you have the other team that works on mental health, but what kinds of things are they?
Yeah, absolutely.
working
So
on?
here's a couple of good ones, right? So show of hands. Let me ask you this: how many of you have driven around the city and at one point seen somebody laying on a sidewalk?
Everybody.
Did you call anybody? Well, that's now chat. Okay. When you see that person that's kind of mumbling, bumbling in and out of traffic, that's chat. When you have that medical pendant alarm that goes off because you fall and you can't get up, but you actually didn't, you just threw it in your purse, or you actually bumped it, or your cat jumped on the monitoring station, that's chat. Yeah. So it's the joke kind of goes, they will handle the calls that if nobody ever showed up, the people would eventually go, well, I guess nobody's coming, and they just walk away. And chat takes the ones, same thing, like let's say your smoke detector's beeping, but it's not actually firing off, it's just the low battery kind of thing. Chat can take those.
Did they replace those batteries for you?
I'm going to say no, and here's why. How many people can reach the ceiling? Well, like me, okay, I don't know if you guys don't know this, but I'm a kind of a short guy. I'm 5'5", and some of you probably think, oh man, he is short. So to replace a smoke detector in some homes, it's up there. And even our guys that are like 6'8", we still have to get a ladder. And so when they go on those, basically what we're looking is there a problem other than a low battery? And a lot of those folks live in rental units, and that kind of defaults back to maintenance. So for example, Lents Commons, Oliver Station East, Oliver Station West, those was all those new buildings that they built down there at 92 and Foster. We go there all the time for problems that maintenance could mitigate. But when they call maintenance doesn't want anything to do with doing their own job, so they tell them you need to call the fire department. Yeah. We subsidize quite a bit of agencies out there in a lot of different ways, and it's very difficult to turn that ship around. For example, and I know this may not seem popular with some folks, but the medical pendant alarms. You guys know what I'm talking about when I say the button that people can push to call for help. That is a private business, and people pay a company to monitor that, and when they push it, all it does is send a signal to the company. And then that signal gets bounced to our dispatch, and then we go out to see what's wrong, if anything. If we go on 100 of those in a month, 99 to 100 will be false. But yet we go, and so, but the companies that are charging, they're making all the money, and we're providing the service. So kind of the same thing. It's
Great
we
business
need
plan.
a hard sit down to look at how we do business. So when we do our budgets, when we say, hey, this isn't working, it goes back to a lot of the problems that the city has. Well, if it's not working, why do we keep doing it the same way? You know? And then the other part is, if it's not working, when you want to come up with a solution, sometimes you can't bring the people that are making the most money off of it into the table to come up with a solution, because they're not going to help you come up with a solution that's going to take money away from their pockets. And that is Portland in a nutshell right there. One of the things I'd like you to look at on the back page of the list I gave you is the run volume. And it sounds kind of neat, so that's year to date. That's from January 1 to now. And you'll see that Engine 11 is second on that list. Historically, Engine 11 is either first, second, or third every year, bar none. And those are hard numbers. And that means that your engine in your area is out on a call that many times year to date already. What that means is that when the next person that calls, we're not there. There are a lot of stations in Portland that have at least 2 units in them, and some have more than that. And they're, how did we describe it earlier? Areas that are a little bit.
Areas that might receive some more help than Lents does in different aspects. And just to chime in on the run volume, to put it in perspective, a lot of calls we may get cleared on if the ambulance is there first and they, deems that they don't need our help. But if it's any fire, car wreck, anything more involved medically, the lowest time we spend on scene is generally in the ballpark of 30 to 45 minutes, and that's including transport there and back. If it's a fire, sometimes we'll be on scene as little as an hour, sometimes up to 4. Car wrecks are often a 45 to an hour scene. So when you see these numbers, to put it in perspective, our last shift, we had 2 days on. We ran almost 40 calls that shift. They weren't all fires and car wrecks and more serious calls and what have you, but we did have a number of those. We had a number of fires, we had a number of car wrecks. So these numbers do mean that we're out a lot, and we aren't always able to provide the fastest service when we're out on these longer scene time calls.
So you're at 2373, and it started in January 1st. With Portland Street Response and chat, are these numbers falling or increasing? Have they made?
They're increasing.
They're increasing.
Yes.
Yet those 2 additional services were designed to make sure you were ready for a real emergency when it does occur.
All right, so I'm thinking of an answer that won't get me in trouble.
Yeah.
All right, here it is. Responding agencies, whether it be the police, fire, Portland Street Response, chat, all of those, their funding is driven by statistics. So if you want money, if you want funding, you better look busy. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If you're not busy, you're not going to get the funding, or they're going to cut your budget. And I think that kind of goes back to why sometimes maybe we don't say no to some of the calls we should be going on. Because that used to be that was the hard mentality, was like, no, we have to get our run numbers up so we can get more money. So with Portland Street Response to chat, part of it is that they're not always available. They're running a lot of calls, and quite honestly, they're running a lot of calls that the police would have gone on, because they're also supposed to help relieve them. And there are times that we're allowed to request, hey, is chat available? And more times than not, I'm told, no, they're not. So our call volume's going up, and I think what happens, and okay, I'll say it. Sometimes we generate calls to make it look like that we're busier than what we really are. In other words, without chat and PSR, those numbers should roll back into the numbers that on the responders there. But somehow we created all these other units, and magically these numbers stay the same, and look, these guys are busy too. Well, where did all these other runs come from? And part of it is that other agencies recognize, hey, we could use them instead of our stuff. We could use them instead of our money. And that's also where some of that comes from.
So let's turn it, despite the calls, so I'm hopeful your response times have improved.
No, they have not.
They haven't.
So, and there's especially for this area, and say along Division, okay, who remembers when Foster was a little wider? When you start choking down streets, that chokes us down too. When we say, hey, we want people in mass transit, I don't know if you know this, but the fire engines don't take on passengers, and we have to share the road with them. When they take out a lane and put it and turn it into a giant green bike lane, that also takes traffic access away for us. When they took away the buildings that were at 92 and Foster and put those mid-rise buildings in there, that also increased traffic and increased the parking that did not exist. When they're going to build those 5-story and 3-story buildings where the Boys and Girls Club is at, that's also going to increase traffic and the congestion that we have, and that simply means that we can't move as fast. People are putting in more speed humps, and it's kind of fun when you hit one of those in an engine. We try to be mindful where they're at, but sometimes we forget, and not all of them have the cutouts. You know what I mean when I say cutouts and speed humps? Who has them when you're driving your car and you actually try to hit it yourself, but it doesn't quite work. It's designed for bigger apparatus like what we have. But all in all those things, they're just pinning us down. And Keith, I'm more behind the curtain kind of thing. We're tired. You know. So for example, like I said, we have a staffing problem in Portland Fire. A lot of departments do. It's not specific just to us. So let me put that out there. 12th Valley, Clackamas, Gresham, we all have the same problem. I worked about 6 days in a row, and I ran 72 calls during that time, and during that out of those 72, 24 of those got me out of bed. Now, yeah, I know it sounds weird, right? I sleep at work, but when we can, because I'm there for a full 24 hours, and I don't know too many people that can stay up for 24 hours at a given rate every single time. But getting up 24 times really starts to affect your mental well-being and your health overall, because at the end of the day, we have families too that we go home to, and when we're tired, we're grouchy, and there's another word for grouchy, but I'm not going to say it. And you don't want to be that to your spouses and to your kids and to your dogs. I don't care for cats, so I don't have any of those. But the call volume is increasing, the response times are getting longer, and quite frankly, the entitlement of a lot of the people that we go on is increasing, and the disrespect is also increasing with that. We have people that love to tell us colorful language and make threats to us, and I'm at the stage now that I'm an old guy, and I've been doing this for a long time. I'll take my ball and go home, and we do. I don't care what your problem is. You know, you're having a heart attack, or you're treating us like crap, and you're being really rude, disrespectful, or heaven forbid, you're being a threat, we will simply leave.
So, give me for instance, 5 years ago versus today, how many calls, percentage-wise, 5 years ago were you addressing mental illness or homeless versus today? What percentage, and what's the transition?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So Station 11 is a station that trends up in call volume most of the time more than anybody else. The call volume for this area goes up higher than almost all 31 other areas. And the reason being is because the socioeconomic makeup of Lents is the lowest in Portland. And please forgive me if I'm offending anybody. That is not my intent. It's just as a blue collar guy that gets up in the middle of the night to go take care of whoever it is, because I don't care. I don't care about demographics. I don't care about orientation. I don't care about your political beliefs. You called me to help, I'm going to come help you along with my friends that we go do. That's what we do, because we care. But the trend has gone up, and we typically go anywhere between 3 and 6% per year. So it doesn't sound...
Where you're addressing homelessness as opposed to a fire and rescue.
Well, as I say, overall the call volume,
okay,
everything's 3 to 6%, but
yeah.
Homelessness, we're talking double digit, Keith. So Portland, in this particular area, and it's no surprise when you look at the bike trails and Springwater Trail and all of those areas like that. I like to call it Canap. You know, I mean, they had their own fleet for a while. And by fleet, I mean their own boats. Their boats on Canap Street there. So the amount of responses now that we are going on homeless, per day, how about that? I think that's an easy way to put it. Percentage-wise, we're looking at 40 to 50% of our calls per day is dealing with homelessness of some sort.
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
accurate. Like anything, it ebbs and flows because the city, makes attempts with various solutions. Whether, whatever you want to call them, sweeps, whatever they are. It ebbs and flows. I've lived various places in the city of Portland over the last 6 years. I currently live in Milwaukee. The biggest thing I've noticed personally, and again, this is just in my point of view from living all over the east side, is that when sweeps happen, whether that be downtown, on the east side, wherever, they tend to end up either in Lents area or over near Division or 122nd, right? So those are the areas that are really heavily populated with displaced folks. The thing with that is, then they'll come and they'll try and do a sweep here, they'll try and appease and clean things up, so we'll get a break. But then, as you've seen right here now, they almost create zones that just make it easier for people to come back in, and that's not, necessarily the right solution. Things like sweeps and stuff, while they work in the short term or the interim, and we maybe get the alleviation briefly, it seems as though those folks and those calls come back exponentially. Where as soon as people are, forgotten about, they can kind of move back into these areas near families and homes and neighborhoods. They start calling more. We're always seeing new outbreaks of fentanyl and different types of methamphetamine, which is incredibly unfortunate, right? And we do have an addiction problem in this city. It's just some of the solutions aren't always, they don't always feel like the right ones. And I know, the city is trying. I'm not trying to call anybody out in particular. We just always kind of hope for some new creative ones because it does seem to go up a little bit every year. Like I said, it ebbs and flows, but overall, homeless calls are trending upwards. I am a newer member. I just hit 5 years in Portland. I did some years in Salem before that. And even in the 5 years I've been here, it's been a pretty astronomical increase in overall homelessness. A big one, we did see a decriminalization of a lot of drugs, which I think was designed with some positive impact. However, the follow-up to that, I think is still, we really need some more follow-up and some more resources to help those folks that we're trying not to give punitive measures to. However, in the current state, I think it definitely has created maybe more of an issue than was intended initially. So,
Brian brings up a good point when it comes to, since homelessness realistically seems to be the driving engine of our FMA, fire management area, Lents, and some other areas. It used to be heroin and meth were the big kings on the block, and those have seemed to kind of, I wouldn't say disappeared, but it's almost like looking at an old car, like, yeah, that was cool back in the day. Fentanyl is the new weapon out there. And the reason being is because it's cheap, it's easy to make, and the people that are making it aren't blowing themselves up like the meth labs that they did. We go on people that overdose on fentanyl every single day. We go on people that die from fentanyl, not every day, but like I would go home and my kids are older and they'll ask, hey Dad, anybody die? Like, and every once in a while like, actually no. Just like that. And I'm sorry if that seems cold-hearted, that my job is to go and try to help people, and that doesn't always work, because the reality is this: not everybody succeeds. Failure and how we thrive as human beings, there are people that simply don't. And no matter what we do for resources, no matter how much money we spend, some people you just can't help. So to put it into perspective, when we go on people that overdose on fentanyl or heroin, a lot of times they're on the bike paths or down here, 92 in Flavel area, or wherever it may be. We give them Narcan. I'm sure everybody has heard about Narcan. The stuff is amazing. It takes about 2 minutes to wake. They usually wake up, and they usually claim that there's nothing wrong or are sleeping, and they get up and walk away. And we don't stop them from leaving because we're not allowed to. That's against the law. That's called kidnapping. Even though we know what's wrong with them, but it comes down to that when people have an addiction, unless they want help, there's nothing you can do to help them. Unless take them and drop them off in the middle of absolutely nowhere where there's nothing around for a year or two to bring it back, that might work. But the reality is, the people that have all these addictions, unless they want help, we're wasting our time, or we're wasting our resources. We're just saying, we might as well just go around and just put out Narcan stations for them. I think that would be almost better than almost anything else that we would do. And then hopefully that they'll have an epiphany one moment and go, oh my gosh, how did I get here? More importantly, how can I get out of here? How can I improve on that? And again, I don't want to sound like I don't care. I do. My best friend died from a drug overdose, and without getting personal, somebody very, very close to me, family-wise, also did. I have a lot of compassion for people that have addictions, because I don't want your mom, I don't want your son, I don't want your baby, I don't want your best friend to ever get stuck in those traps, because it can happen to any single one of us. Because you made one bad decision, you gave into peer pressure because you want to be with that guy or that girl or your friends or whatever. All those people made a bad decision somewhere that started them on that path. But the reality is, once they're on that, unless they want help, there's nothing we can do.
I'm just curious, are any of your team members on chat, are they dealing with these overdoses, or is this another team that comes out? I mean, if they're called out and they do find someone that's overdosing, or do they have Narcan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So chat does carry they do carry what's called ALS equipment, so advanced life saving. The same stuff that we have on our apparatus,
Okay.
medical-wise, they have that. But they have to have a paramedic to go with that, and sometimes they don't. Getting a paramedic to work in Portland is extremely difficult, because Portland Fire has not embraced the EMS side yet. If you look at Tualatin Valley, Gresham, Clackamas, and almost any other department in the country, they realize that the trend isn't necessarily always fire, it's community medicine and emergency medicine and whatever other kind of medicine, and so they try to start staffing and equipping that way. Portland has stuck to the idea that, nope, we're the fire department. The medic is just somebody that we have to do. That's why we only have one medic on rig, not even all the time. Sometimes we don't have any. And so to get them to hire medics is very painful for them to do that. And it's very frustrating. But to answer your question, they do carry equipment, and Narcan is a very simple medicine to administer. You could either use a needle, or you could even just spray it up their nose and it'll work. And for me, when I go on folks that overdose, I will hand it to them and give it to them for free, an extra one, before they walk away. It's like, this is for you or for your friend, because people that typically overdose, they hang out with other people that are also doing the same. And so I will give out Narcan every day, all day, if they would let me. You have a question, sir?
I heard that Narcan is only good for like an hour, and they need to get medical attention. If they don't, that drug or whatever will.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that
So
accurate or is that not accurate?
sort of. So Narcan. To put it in real basic terms, when you take a drug, opiates. The way opiates kill people isn't that you overdose and all of a sudden your heart stops. That's not what opiates do. Opiates block the signal from the brain to the lungs to go take a breath. There's no more communication between the brain and the lungs. It stops because opiates block that. And so what happens is when people overdose on opiates, the heart still beats, everything still works except for the communication to take a breath, which means they're not breathing. They just lay there and they suffocate. It's like holding your breath and never ever taking another breath, even though your body's going, we really need to do this, but there's a communication block. So what Narcan does is the party crasher. It jumps in there and it kicks opiate out of those receptor sites. Well, that's a fancy word. It basically opens up the lines of communication and allows the brain to go, hey, take a breath. And then you see them come around. We have the pulse oxygen, the thing you put on your finger, and you kind of see how much oxygenation, if you will, in your blood. That will go from something really low and deadly, and it literally just skyrockets with each breath that they take. And it like I said, typically takes about 2 minutes, and then they wake up, and they kind of gather their wits, and then they leave. And so Narcan is dependent upon how strong the opiates that they took and how many they took. Could they relapse? They could. Have they? I've never seen it because most of the people that we go on, either they leave or they get in an ambulance and they go. But I have never personally seen a relapse, but it is a possibility.
Second question.
So let's make this the last question because we're running out of time.
Sorry.
No, I'm good. Pass.
Okay. Hey, folks, things seem to be getting a little better for us. I'm one of those people. I'm optimistic, but man, I'm like the wind. I can change. Like, well, that really sucked. I thought that was going to be awesome, and I advocate for Lents like there's no tomorrow. I don't live in Lents. Let me put that out there. I live in Newburgh. I don't know if you. That's out in wine country. I love it out there, but I advocate as if this is my neighborhood.
So
There are a lot
is
of
there
people think-
someone we should be writing to, calling?
In regards to,
If you were in fear of losing your little rescue vehicle, or was that taken care of?
Sure, I have to be careful because I represent Portland Fire. So if I say, yeah, you need to get all these people and tell them to stop, close my rescue, I can get in trouble. But it does come down to this. When they do close it, that's less that Lents has. Lents, statistically speaking, call volume wise and legitimate call wise, I don't know what a good term for that is. Lents is at the top. In other words, if you were to take a map and plug where all the fires are happening in Portland, 80% of them happen in the southeast. Lents, Rockwood, up where Station 7 is at like 122nd and Stark area. Most of that stuff happens down here. About 80% of all the fires in Portland are down here. Lents has almost more than anybody else. So if any neighborhood needs more fire protection, you would think it would be here. And actually, Lents has less than almost. We have less. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
There is a thing called City Gate. It's a study that they did, and it's an external study. The city paid money. Hey, come in and take a look at how we do business. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How do we need to improve? That's going to be released in supposedly a couple of days. I would highly, highly encourage you to get a hold of that, because that is going to be one of the driving engines on how they're going to use money in the future, and whether they decide to close the station and maybe move those resources somewhere else because they're needed somewhere else, or hey, we're going to add units to a station. And it's also going to be, how are we going to spend money on future programs? And we did one back in 2008 called the Try Data, and Portland was like, no, we'll do this and this, and they snubbed the rest of the information because they didn't like it. So hopefully Citygate is the same way.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Hey Keith, I want to hear your speech, but I got tasked with 2 reports that they have to be done tonight. I was like, thanks Chief, I appreciate that.
Fine, no problem. Well, if you got a few minutes, great. It's not completely understand. It sounds like you and I are going to meet each other. So
I would like to hear your spiel, because
it's geared towards you, Chris.
I want to hear it because honestly, the homeless they're burning us out.
Yeah.
And just like anything, we're people. After a while, we're just like, I don't care. You know, whatever. We're going on. We know a lot of our homeless folks by name, and by saying we don't care, it's just like, oh, it's them again.
Captain, officers, here's what I'm working hard for, is that if we don't make a change in our city, we're going to lose good men and women like Captain Starling, because I know your stories. I go on ride-alongs, and I know you're getting tired. Portland used to be the center of the universe when it came to fire in the Northwest. Everybody wanted to become Portland Fire and Rescue. With the attrition, he has 33 officers he has to hire now. And while you have the budget, it doesn't mean you have the pipeline.
That's right.
And my concern is that when we go all call to the city, hey, we need people to help keep us safe, to protect us, like police. Last year we didn't hire 1 police officer in the city of Portland, not 1. You having the budget doesn't mean we're safe. It just means we've got something on paper.
He is correct. The one last thing is, I don't know if you've seen the ads, but we're looking to do laterals now. And what a lateral is hey, if you work for another department and you have a certain amount of credentials and you've been there for so many years, which all firefighters do, come work for us. Nationwide, we got 14 people to apply. 14 out of the entire country. What does that say?
So I was gonna ask you, is that because people don't, or firefighters don't want to come to Portland, or?
The fire community is a very close family, and we all know. We know who's crap, and we know which departments are trending in the right way.
Yeah.
We're not.
We're going to show you some information, some data, so you can draw that conclusion. You'll see information and some numbers that really show you where Portland stands, both city, nationally, internationally. And so you'll kind of say, oh, now I understand why it's hard to hire people.
Would you guys mind if we, I'd like to hear some of this. Would you guys mind if you?
Maybe the first 10 if you could, you'll see the big data, and then we do have prescriptions. In other words, how are we going to change the direction? This is not a presentation built on, let's just regurgitate the problem. This is really the opposite. Here is what we're dealing with now. Here's what we can do as a community to change the direction of Portland almost overnight. Because if we don't have solutions, we're just looking at another 5 years of the same, or worse, now we lose our fire. And we really do and are at an inflection point in the city. Yeah, let me, I'll try and talk fast and
You guys got my card, so if you want to call or email or anything like that, or keep come for a visit, feel free.
Thank you, Captain. Great job. Char, this isn't a clicker. This is just a remote, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So, great to have fire here. I've been doing ride-alongs. My name's Keith Wilson. I ran for city council several years ago. My campaign team and I really enjoyed what the platform items were. I had worked several years before that to run for city council. I own and operate a mid-sized trucking company, transportation company in the Northwest. So I understand complex systems. I run a 24-hour operation. And I understand that every detail matters. Safety is critical, and the system has to be near perfect for it to run, or else the entire system implodes. This last couple of years, I've really been studying some of our biggest issues in Portland, working on solutions, and here's one of them. Homelessness is one of our most seminal issues right now, right? It's affecting all of us, the housed and the unhoused, and everybody's quality of life is being affected, the housed and the unhoused. It's universal. So let's start with some history. I'm going to show you some numbers. So the right to shelter. Everybody was building shelters in the 80s. I was homeless in New York, in Manhattan. This is where I stayed. This is de Blasio just last year reviewing a homeless shelter. They passed a law. They said nobody can be unsheltered on the street. Now they have 60,000 shelter beds every single night. And they spend $2 billion. Portland's budget is $5 billion, to give you that relationship. Per unit, per bed, $124 a night. That's more than most hotels. That's how much the homeless shelter system costs in New York. Not as much, but I'm going to show you some numbers because I want you guys to understand this is not just a thought or a subjective. I'm going to show you some objective information so you can draw the conclusions as if you're the mayor or perhaps the bureau director or of fire. In San Diego, spent 2 weeks with the mayor in their office because I want to say, is shelter the solution? They're very expensive. $3 million to set up a tent. You're not ending homelessness with tents. It takes $3 million just to operate it with the managers and such. So they were able to get it down to $52 per person per night, much better than New York. But this isn't going to solve anything. And this is what we've done in Portland. This is a 200-person tent. In Portland, we built a navigation center. It's a permanent structure, quasi. It's designed for 30 years. We spent $3 million on that, and we only have 100 souls that are being saved tonight. I spent 2 weeks with the public defender because homelessness is systemic. Go to jail, get out of jail, go to the street. At the homeless court program, Matt Wexler, he helps expunge records so we can get people into permanent housing, right? We don't want people living in shelter. Great program, just thought I'd bring that up. So, housing first. In the 90s, we realized shelter isn't working. It's not ending homelessness. It's just simply putting a Band-Aid on it. So the entire nation has moved towards housing first. Let's just build structures, because the most effective solution is to give somebody housing and no preconditions. If you're addicted, if you're mentally ill, if you have a physical disability, let's get them housed. Now they can start working on the root cause. You can't do that from a shelter. And it's a wonderful program, and it works. And we are investing almost every available dollar we have in Portland to do that. The Henry is one of our newest projects. It's an SRO. I lived in an SRO in New York. So it was my first housing. One room, I didn't have a kitchen, I didn't have a bathroom, but I was able to live and really succeed in New York City, Manhattan. It worked. In the 70s and 90s, we removed 1 million of these SROs in the nation. Do the math. We have 600,000 homeless in the US right now. 100,000 of them are mentally ill. We deinstitutionalized our mental health system beginning in the 50s. And now we see people walking down the street, in some cases naked, with nowhere to go. We can do better as a society than just allowing the street to be the end. I think we all agree that building deeply affordable housing is better for our community than building shelters. We know that. And that's where our nation is really trying to put all their dollars at right now. Housing first, though, while it sounds like it's really good, it's excellent for the individual. There is nothing better. However, every city that's tried to put all their money into housing first, not one of those communities has ended unsheltered homelessness. We're all really, and you'll hear a lot about housing first. Yes, it works for the soul, the individual. But as a community, we can't keep up because it's very expensive. And here are the numbers on that. So this is HUD. This is the Housing Urban Development numbers. In 2005, you can see it was on parity with transitional housing. Transitional housing is shelter. 24 months or less is what transitional housing. Permanent supportive housing is permanent. It's a house for soul. In that last 13 years, we've increased permanent supportive housing for housing first 159%. It's almost zero for transitional shelters. We do not build shelters. Our federal government does not fund shelters anymore because we don't feel it's a long-term investment. It doesn't work anymore. But look what happened in LA. In LA, they've done great. Since 2010 to 2019, they've grown their permanent supportive housing 66%. Shouldn't they have ended homelessness? They've grown housing first 66% in 9 years. Billions and billions of dollars. And in that period of time, unsheltered houselessness in LA has grown 50%. Now that's nowhere else in the country. There's nowhere else in the world that those numbers are that bad, except for Portland. So my point is, everybody's going to talk about housing first, and I do agree it works, but it doesn't work on scale. You have to have something to address the inflow, because housing first is about the outflow, but if you don't address the inflow, as we noticed in LA, it's only continued to grow. So now let's talk about Portland. So this is recognizable to you. This is Trevor. He's on the multi-use path right over here. We have enabled camping in our city to the point where it's growing, where Trevor is one of 2,000 souls. These are on the 2019 point in time numbers. This is not the one that we just took in February. It is systemic here in Portland right now. Trevor's dad is so concerned, John, for Trevor's death because he's a matter of a few hundred yards away from us. I should say we're on Flavel, but if you were by Matt's place, a few hundred yards. His dad came down from Seattle, because he's from Seattle, and gave him this palace, as Trevor says, because when he gets swept, he just moves it onto the multi-use path and moves it 100 meters away out of the sweep zone. It's become systemic because our unsheltered are so intelligent and want to keep the lifestyle. They've created structures that actually encourage. Now this is your neighbor. He's moved now because he got swept. And in the last 2 years, it's grown 22% unsheltered in Portland. Yet we continue to spend billions of dollars to our Portland housing bond, our Metro housing bond, right? $1 billion we spent to build. And all we've received is an increase in unsheltered. And we see that on our streets. I saw that driving up here. And I do want to say, our city has normalized homeless encampments. This is normal to us. And asks our neighbors to wait outside. They're asking Trevor to wait outside 3 to 5 years because that's how long it takes to build affordable housing while they wait for housing. And because we're waiting, in Portland, here are our numbers. 53% of the unsheltered in Multnomah County are homeless upon arrival. They did not become homeless in Multnomah County. Everybody will explain it's affordable. Somebody will say it's the addiction. Others will say it's mental illness. They're all right. There are 2,000 reasons, because there's 2,000 unsheltered on our street. It is not a monolith. I get in discussions with people, it's affordable housing. No, that's only 8% of the people say that they entered unsheltered homeless because of it. Let's not talk about numbers. Let's just know that they're individuals. We have to care for them in some way, shape, right? Those are our brothers and our sisters. As Captain Starling said about losing, I lost my sister a year ago to addiction, so I know this personally. So we now know it's 53%, but in Portland, we are the worst in the nation by far. Of that 715 souls that chose to move to Portland to be unsheltered, they chose to be unsheltered here. They were unsheltered somewhere else. 68% of these were from outside of Oregon. Okay, but when you look at the numbers, LA and Portland have the most unsheltered rate per capita in the United States. And in the industrialized nations, first world countries, we're the worst. Our two cities. But Portland's at 68%. Los Angeles is only 20% from out of state. And then you look at San Francisco, which is, I visit there a lot, only 8% are from out of state. Portland is a magnet. We have something here that others want to be homeless here when they're homeless somewhere else. Decriminalization has, again, I try not to go into a monolith, but decriminalization has been a really big part. I was in the Oregon Department of Forestry, I was in the Clatsop County Forest last Friday, going through a project I'm working with. And I said, wow, what is the RV doing out in the forest? What is that tent? He says, Keith, I get calls from Texas, I get calls from Miami, hey, I'm gonna come out to your forest. And they ask, why? Well, because they want to use and they don't want anybody to be compromising them. Isn't that amazing? So let's not just put it down to it, because these numbers were before decriminalization, right? This is not new code, Kristen.
Keith, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're one of the very first people to ever tell the truth.
These numbers are not my, I bring these numbers up because everybody says that's not true. And I get people saying that's not true, and they're the right people that are running your city. And I say, whoa, 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 and I speak to them all.
We ask everyone we go, say, so where are you from? And that number is pretty damn accurate. And when you get into the people that actually run the homeless business, because it's become its own industry, many of them are convinced, no, these are people that are from here, and we're like, that is not true. That's.
And those are the numbers that all your electeds are looking at. That's the point in time. And the reason why I do a print page, I put it on, because I don't want them arguing in the middle of the process to say, these are your numbers. I'm just going through your 60-page report, trying to develop a direction to go, because that's what we use. Data is critical to give us not the direction we go, but it informs us, right? You should never take it at face value. You still got to get out and put boots on the ground to understand it. So this is boots on the ground. This is your neighbor who died last year. This is Robert Delgado. He died a mile away. Severe, persistent mental illness, and he was our neighbor. He was your neighbor and a good person. He was shot. He was going through a crisis. This is Lents Park. I was doing the point in time count a few months ago. What I'm saying is that 53% are from out of state, but 47% are our neighbors. When I was at Lents Park right here doing the point in time count, a high school classmate walked up to me, and I did a count with her. So I want you to have empathy and compassion, but have the respect to know that we got to help our high school classmates. Because 47% of them are from here. I don't want to disconnect us and think that it's those people. No, it's not. It's our brothers and sisters. My brother was homeless in your neighborhood just a few years ago. And everybody says we need housing, we need some sort of solution. Matt Huff is here, a very good friend of mine who has and is the minister at the Church of Nazarene a mile away, right? He is one of our city's most important leaders. He created Agape Village, and you know it sits half full right now. Yet there are 100 souls within 1 square mile right now that could use that. It's half empty. Because we've normalized encampments, we allow people to live on the street, which is the most unsafe, unsanitary, dangerous thing we could ever do. But let me kind of explain. This is what the United Nations says when they come to visit the West Coast. This is the United Nations Special Envoy to the West Coast who sees hot zones, military zones, refugee camps. They come here and their quote is, there's a cruelty here that I don't think I've seen. And that's what I want to say, everybody, is that we are being cruel to our brothers and sisters. And for us to try and say that we're being anything less, it's cruel in and of itself. Let's be clear. And here are some of the dates. Here are some of the information. My point to you is we have to change the narrative in our town. Allowing people to camp on our streets is misguided compassion. You should never, ever allow my son to live on your corner. Ever. Help him. Because that's somebody's son. Compassion is not allowing a person suffering a severe psychotic breakdown or from a lethal substance abuse addiction to literally drift towards death as you walk by. Chris asked a question a couple minutes ago. Have you seen somebody just passed out on the street? And have you called and half of your hands went up? And I know we've all walked by that. I have. And it kills me. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to get that non-emergency and I'm going to try and help that person because that's somebody's son. But now let's talk about it. I gave this presentation. A couple officers in the room, 2 lady officers, they pulled me aside and said, Keith, you don't even know the half of it. There are women out there that are going to be raped tonight. And the 2 officers said, Keith, you got to know more. And you know, some of them are going to be raped multiple times. Let's be clear. No person should ever be on the street tonight, ever. Because it's a different society out there. It's a parallel universe we're living in right now. Some of us are lawful and we get cited and pulled over by the police, and some people are unlawful and the police are told not to intercede. We've completely had a breakdown in our society, and that's what we're experiencing right now. Allowing people to die on our streets is not compassion at all. Somebody homeless is going to die, average age at 47. If they are like Robert, severe persistent mental illness, the average age is 35, half of the average age. We have to get motivated to do something because they are going to die. It's not a if, it is an absolute actuality that they're going to die. The quality of life is important for both the homed and the homeless. And then this is the thing that guides me. Chris, you lost some. I lost my sister. 75% of those that are addicted to drugs or alcohol are going to recover and live a healthy, long life. I love that, right? If it were only 25% going to survive, wow, that's a foregone conclusion. No, the vast majority of our loved ones are going to succeed at recovering from their addiction and live a full and healthy life. That should motivate us all to stop enabling what's going on in the street, because we're not helping them recover. We're actually pushing them to the grave, right? Society should never, ever tolerate that sort of behavior. We should help, and we do that through our systems, right? Citing them, asking them to go to court, to decriminalization, to see a drug counselor, right? Things like that. So now we're talking about solutions. Built for Zero, I don't know if a lot of you, I've been really leading that charge for Built for Zero. It's a national campaign. I work with their operation. Where housing first is outflow. Let's create an opportunity for somebody to go to. Built for Zero is about before somebody gets into homelessness, let's address the inflow. Let's not even let them hit the street. And so doing that, instead of simply building more housing alone, Built for Zero opts to pursue an additional strategy. They seek to reduce street homelessness. If somebody's getting ready to get discharged from a hospital, do you know right now what they do? They just discharge you. We need to be holding our hospitals accountable, our jails accountable. Where are they going to go? Mm-hmm. And they should not, or I would say that they're culpable in that process, right? And that's what Built for Zero does. It says, where are they coming from? Let's address the inflow. Let's not let somebody hit boots on the street before it just becomes that cycle again and again and again. We can do it, and it's a wonderful program. So it's starting up right now in Portland. It's doing well. It is fully engaged in August. So we're a month away. And what it's going to require is all of you to participate. If somebody's on the street right outside, befriend them, get their name, turn their information in so we can know what their solution is. If it's a bus ride home, we can do that. But if you don't know they need a bus ride home, you can't end that person's homelessness, right? I don't want to discourage you. I don't want you to think you got to get involved. Our whole city, Captain Starling, you're going to be involved in this. Every time you go and you Narcan somebody, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? And you're going to put that into a system, because outreach is going to want to know, where is he today? Where is he tomorrow? Where is he the third day? Hey, he just needs a bus. Hey, Captain Starling, you're out there? Boom. You need to call up Jolene. Jolene has a bus ticket. Let's get him on the road. Let's get him to his parents. Do you see how that solution, right now, Captain Starling, when you Narcan somebody, do you do any information? Do you get their full bio, their information, and enter it into a system?
If they give it to us, yes.
If you give it to us. So we're going to start creating profiles for everybody on the street, because everybody wants to build trust. When you build trust with somebody, they're going to open up and they'll give you what their root cause is and what help they need. And it's 2,000 different solutions. It is not, again, a monolith. And it really is effective. So here's our numbers right now. This is functional 0. We understand that, homelessness, some people enter the street. But we're doing great on youth and families. But elderly 70 plus, we have 24,230 and 1354 for chronic. We're way off of what the national metrics say that we're going to be successful at. And we're going to hit these numbers, I'm sure of it. And so I've been visiting cities around the country who are built for 0 cities. And I've been going out and doing outreach to find out, well, how do you do it? Let's bring it to Portland. In Rockford, Illinois, they've ended homelessness. 1 unsheltered. Angie does a great job. She came and spoke to us in the community a few months ago. Shar, you might have been on it. I went to Gulf Coast, Mississippi. I get a lot from the mayor and our commissioners. Well, Portland's just too big. It can't be solved. We have too many unsheltered. So every time they tell me these problems, I go and I solve them. Gulf Coast, Hurricane Katrina, 60,000 unsheltered in 1 day. You tell me who has a problem. Do they give up and just let it happen? They lost every shelter in the hurricane. They don't have shelters. Do you need shelters to end homelessness? No. You need communities, though. That's what Community Solutions does. So what, I love some of the conversations she had. She told me, so she befriended the police officers because they realized, they said, Mary, $300,000 in arresting homeless. You need to do something, because Mary's in charge of their continuum of care. And she said, okay, if you want, then I need you to give me officers. And they said, what? So now the police work for Mary, and the police are going out and they're getting the names. Hey, how are you doing, Sam? You said you know him by name, right? Right, Captain Starling?
Yes.
And so do the police, but the police in Portland are told by their superiors to bypass interacting. They're not allowed to engage with the homeless unless there's, unfortunately, a negative circumstance, right?
Yes.
You know that information. But in Gulf Coast, it's a whole different way. They work for Mary. When they see somebody, they're calling it in. Hey, Sam, we can help you out. There's 54 homeless today. And this is one of the stories I like the most. When they were getting going, they had a police officer at the bus station, just stationed there. 2 kids get off the bus and they're lost. The officer said, hey, what can I help you with? And they said, hey, can you point us to where the shelter is? And he said, well, wait a second. Why do you need a shelter? Well, we're homeless. We came from a different city. What city was that? He interviewed him. We don't have any shelters. He called up Trina, the young black lady right there. Didn't let him hit the street. Got him a hotel for 3 days. Called the parents. Got him a bus ride. And sent them home. Do you understand? Don't let them hit boots on the street. They addressed the inflow. And do you know what the officer did as well? Which I thought was the most extraordinary thing? He called the city who sent those homeless to Gulf Coast. Now that's not addressing inflow, that's ending homelessness in Gulf Coast. Because he said that was the most inhumane, despicable thing you can do. Now tell me if that peer pressure didn't make a statement on that continuum of care or that officer, whoever it is, right? Now, where's that in Portland? Where's that sort of community? Where are we holding people accountable for saving lives today? So let's talk about cities that have ended homelessness. You don't need Built for Zero. So that's Boise. Mayor Beater and I are buddies because he has an extraordinary city. I want to know exactly what you're doing. He has 61 homeless. Mayor Wheeler said it was the West Coast thing.
Oh.
So I went to the West Coast, to Boise. 61 souls on the street. It's half the size of the town of us, right? So here's a quick story. Time check. Are we doing okay on time?
Yes.
Okay, about 15, 20 more minutes. And
No, you're fine.
But I have a specific question for all of you. I want your engagement. So Mayor Beater, Boise versus Martin. Has anybody heard about that law case before? Okay. It was the Ninth Circuit Court handed down, the Supreme Court upheld and said that if you don't have a shelter bed for somebody who's in a tent, you can't move that tent. This is Boise versus Martin. This is Dave Beater, Mayor Beater, who lost that case. Mayor Beater, you have no homeless. How does it? He said, Keith, let me give you this example. As soon as he lost that case, fire, police, justice, homeless services all pulled back from it and let everybody start camping. Right outside of City Hall, they had a park, and it was an encampment now. And everybody moved in. He called them all in and said, whoa, what are you guys doing? That's not our code. That's not our civil code. People can't camp. Well, Mayor Dieter, we lost the case. He said, yeah, but it doesn't mean we can't treat people with dignity and provide a safe sleep at our shelters. Got everybody together, all his 4 shelters. I want you to get a bunch of mats together. I need at least 250 beds ready. Gave the encampment 30 days. 29, 20, 10. Working on outreach. We've got a place for you. You're going to be safe. You can't camp here. On day 0, they moved the encampment. They didn't sweep it to where they were going to go somewhere else, because camping in Boise is not allowed. It's against their code, right? He didn't sweep them. He was saving them. And of those 250 souls, he said, Keith, it was the most amazing thing. A third left. They went to Salt Lake City, went to Bozeman, they went to Portland, because that's where they were from. He said a third went home. They just went home to the couch. They went home to some other means that they had. He said a third accepted our offer, and we had 80 people sleeping in our shelter. We were saving 80 people and helping them with outreach to provide a better tomorrow. And they had 0 homelessness in all through Boise. Those 61s are going to be hard to find people in a canyon or something like that. Pretty amazing. So when Mayor Wheeler or one of our commissioners says it can't be done here, tell me why, and I will find the solution. So I went to Athens. Athens, Greece, because they have all these refugee camps. They have 250,000 refugees in Greece. Certainly they're going to have homelessness, right? None. So I went there to go visit the refugee camps. There's 4 in Athens, because I want to say, well, how do you scale up and how do you provide shelter? Because I thought that was the solution, right? And my tour guide says, there's cemeteries of souls. You do not want to build permanent shelter, because you're just warehousing people. You're not giving them an opportunity, and it's very expensive. But I said, but wait a second, Andreas, driving through Athens, I see no homeless. I see no tent caps. He said, oh, no, we take care of them all. Because we have what are called houses of peace. Houses of peace. Every community takes care of every neighbor. Every community. It's up to us. It's not up to police. It's not up to fire. It's up to us. So I'm going to explain to you what I'm going to ask you to give us to create, not houses of peace, and it doesn't have to be religious-based. It has to be dignity-based, where we can care for our neighbors. So a friend of mine in Brisbane, Australia has a great thing. It's called Bed Down. They take all of their parking structures, and at night from 9 until 7 a.m., they bring in these pop-up mattresses, bedding. It's very effective, but it's warm there, right? When I ran this by Mayor Beater, and I have a buddy of mine who ran the homeless program for Obama, and I'd have these meetings when they go, well, I don't know, Keith, but you see, we have a huge humanitarian crisis on our street. They may say, you gotta try things, right? Right? Try, fail, fix, try again, over and over and over and over again. So I called up Doug Kelsey at TriMed, the general manager, who's a friend of mine. Doug, I want you to let me borrow one of your parking structures. And he said, what? I said, yeah, I'm gonna spend the night on World Homeless Day at your parking structure. He said, it's crazy. I'll let you do it, and I'm gonna give you the gateway, because it's surrounded by homeless. My numbers as far as ridership are plummeting. It's affecting my business. Nobody's riding transit because they don't want to go down the multi-use path and feel in danger. They don't want to go to the transit center and take a bus or light rail and be in danger. Do you understand? He says, please try it. So I did it. Worked out great. And he gave me a bunch of security. So police came by. He told me this was TriMed security. They were keeping an eye on me. But I spent the night there on a cold October night. It worked. So I called George Devendorf, who runs Transition Projects. I called Mark Jolin, who is our Joint Office of Homeless Services Director, and said, you guys, this works, it works. So they tried it. Mark said, okay, I'm gonna try it. This is severe winter shelter. Well, of course he tried it on a negative 22-degree day. So I went and I volunteered there. And he came and visited at midnight. George came by at midnight and I said, guys, it's not gonna work. You can't pop it up. It's too expensive. You can't bring in these $5,000 propane units. It's cold, it's 22 degrees. I froze my button off that night. You can't sustain it. We have to keep it low cost. It can't be high cost because we want to build housing. And this was the crew and everything. I went out to 20 of these souls and asked them all to come in, and one guy did. One guy did, because he doesn't want to lose his belongings. He knows it's going to get stolen, right?
Yeah.
So despite that, this guy is in 22-degree weather, right? Less than that, and it was super cold, and he wouldn't come in just for a night because he didn't want to lose anything, or he wanted to continue that, or whatever it is. It was low barrier. So it failed, and I told Mark and I told George it failed. So I asked Matt, a World Homeless Day, to let me borrow his sanctuary. And Matt's here, and this is Church of Nazarene. Because I noticed United Gospel Mission tried it. So Matt Perkins and I, a friend of mine who's homeless, I said, come and spend the night with me. He says, great. So we set it up. I did a video. You can go to my Facebook page. I said, this is going to work. We can stand this up at 9 p.m. We can knock it down at 7 a.m. And we can give the church back to Matt during the day. And we can save 100 souls tonight. It worked. Matt Perkins at about 11 p.m. when I finished my video and everything, he says, okay, let's pack up and go home. I said, hold on, Matt. He says, we're spending the night. It's World Homeless Day. He says, Keith, you gotta understand, this is my everyday, right? But I said, we're still gonna do it. I learned so much about meth and fentanyl and heroin, and you don't mix the two together. And you don't have a low barrier. It's not for everybody. So I understand that. We're gonna do it. But you know what? Matt, how much did you cost? How much did you charge me for this?
Oh, nothing.
How much would you charge me if I set it up every single night of every day of the year?
Well, Union Gospel Mission pays us $150 a month.
$150 a month, a little less than $3 million in capital, right? Right? Because we want to get unsheltered homelessness to zero. That's our goal. So why are we putting a bunch of money into hard-walled structures in the shelter?
Because someone makes money off of it.
Yeah. So, pop-up community shelter. So here's a new severe winter shelter. So I thought, we're Salvation Army. It's in my neighborhood. I'm going to go. So I worked at this one a couple months ago. And Aaron Brown was there. Aaron Brown is the Joint Office of Homeless Services Chief Financial Officer. And he was volunteering with me. So he's the numbers guy. And I said, I'm working to end unsheltered homelessness at Aaron. He said, oh, you are? He said, how are you doing that? So I explained it. He's like, wow, okay. I said, yeah, we need 3,000 beds and we need them right now. And look at what we're doing here. And he said, yeah, we can do it. And I said, Aaron, how much are you paying Salvation Army for this next 2 weeks for using their gym? And he said, they're not charging us a dime. Do you see where I'm going with this, everybody? It's not a money's game. It's just simply an effort game. But you're going to have to put the effort forward because no one's going to charge you. Matt doesn't charge anybody $150. It doesn't even cover his electricity, right? Salvation Army, not a dime to save lives because there's communities out there that want to help. Now, let's talk. Commissioner Lindbergh and I have a meeting in 2 weeks. We've been going back and forth. So Mayor Clark and Commissioner Lindbergh, Commissioner Blumenauer, they ended homelessness in Portland. It's been done before. We're the only ones standing in this way from doing it again. It's been done before because unsheltered homelessness was endemic in Northwest Portland. It was every day of every year. Fortified wine, right? This was 30, 40 years ago. Remember the 80s? I remember going to Amsterdam. It was a horrible place. Northwest Portland wasn't so good. Tents everywhere, people living on the street. Mayor Clark and Commissioner Lindbergh said, no, we can stand up and get the community together. Mayor Clark's mission was to help those experiencing homelessness who concentrate in Old Town while enforcing a common standard. It's just another nice word for our civil codes. Our codes have to be meaningful or society is chaos. His goal was to keep the streets clear and businesses open. It was a nationally lauded plan. It was 65 public-private partnerships, and that's exactly what Matt and exactly what the Salvation Army is. They're private. We provide the public, and we create a partnership, and we don't have partnerships in our city. They ended unsheltered homelessness in Old Town. 30 years ago. We know what to do. So this is not Boise, this is not Athens. This is about our community just using, let's just go back to the future and let's just do it again. And that's all I'm asking for you to consider today. So now here are the numbers. So I'm going to explain to you where we need to spend our money and not. So all I'm asking for us to do is create pop-up shelters throughout our community. In every community have a pop-up shelter. We don't have this. All we have is emergency shelters, and they're 24 hours. An old emergency shelter, used to be only 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. In most cities around the nation, they're only open from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's only in Portland where they're primarily 24 hours, except for the United Gospel Mission that we do, right? Because we got away from saving people at night to where we have very limited space. We're open 24 hours, but what about who's going to show up tonight? I was volunteering at Matt's shelter, and at 10 p.m., we got full. And there's a ruckus out front. And we had to say, stop, sorry, we're at our capacity, you can't come in. Sunday night, it's 35 degrees out. It's 11 p.m. The bus line at Powell and 205 does not run that often. And so you're turning 10 souls away and the F-bombs that were being thrown because they know that they're in peril that night, right? We sent these people away. So it's not just that these people want to be in tents. There are people that want to have shelter tonight, and we're not providing at least that bare minimum. Because to put up somebody at the Church of Nazarene tonight, it's $9.35. That's it. Remember what I said the cost was in New York City? Anybody remember? For one night, one bed? $124. For less than 10% of what is being provided in New York City, here's what our emergency shelter costs. So this is just at, this is Jean's place. This is the Willamette Center. $68. We can't provide $9 for 3,000 souls to save them tonight. I promise you, it's super low cost. And here's what our Safe Rest Villages cost.
We don't even want to
To
go there.
not even, I know, to not even set up a permanent structure, it's $95. Now we need them. It's an option. Remember, it's an option. We need a whole host of options for whatever that homeless soul needs. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Let's give individuals options so they can choose. But if we did Housing First, do you see why everybody's moving to Housing First? Because it's only $46 to build an SRO. Now that's great. So my point is, and why I have them green is, yes, every available capital dollar we have needs to go for that $37 million structure. We should not spend a single dime on a temporary solution because it's expensive and it's not going anywhere. And building homeless shelters is not an economically viable plan for a future civil society. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We don't want to be a city that keeps building hard-walled structures. We become New York City then. At $2 billion a year were our budget. We can't afford it, nor should we ask somebody to live in a permanent shelter. But can we not save lives tonight and spend zero money on capital but save money tonight? So this is how we do it. Key point is unsheltered homelessness ended. Everybody is down on their luck at some point. I was sleeping in LaGuardia Airport. The reason I did the airport, because at least I knew I had security and I was going to be dry, and everybody would think I was just a transit. So that's why I did LaGuardia. Please let me do it. But I was down on my luck. I only needed help for a few days, but I was down on my luck, right? It's Thanksgiving, it's 1986. Everybody went somewhere else. I ended up with nowhere to go. But it doesn't mean I need to sleep in a tent and then get beat up or stolen or something like that, or have to do drugs and stay up at night because I feel unsafe. But all our capital investment should go to Housing First because it works for the individual, but we shouldn't let anybody ever be on the street, ever. And now, remember I told you about the mayor said, when I told people you're gonna have to come into shelter, and a third of them left? Remember Laurelhurst Park 4 months ago when we cleared it? So here's what I read versus what you might have heard. So we went to Laurelhurst Park, there's 100 souls, we're gonna clear you, you need to leave and you need to accept our shelter at the Mount Scott Community Center. Of those 100 souls, only 40 of them accepted that. 60 went to a different encampment, left the city or whatnot. Same thing as Mayor Beater, 33% accepted his support. As soon as we tell everybody, the 3,000 souls, that there's no more camping, day zero has arrived, a third are going to take our cots and our beds and our shelters. A third's going to go home and a third's just going to go, a third is going to leave the state and go back home because Portland doesn't allow camping and a lifestyle for whatever they chose any longer. A third is just going to go back to their homes, to their parents, whatever the case may be. So I'm getting to that seminal question for you. These pop-up shelters, they're well stocked. Outreach teams are there. You read the article in the Oregonian a couple months ago about people said, I haven't seen an outreach person in 2 years. We have 80 outreach staff with 3,000 souls. Of course you're not, because they're overwhelmed. No more camping. Unsheltered homelessness has been ended with pop-up community shelters. 0. Because we're going to have dozens of these pop-up community shelters. We have 80 outreach. What do you know? Every single night we're going to know Sam and Sally and Sid. Every night we're going to know their name and build trust with that person. Every single night. Because they're going to go to a pop-up community shelter. Because they're not going to be in a tent at all. So we're now effective and we build IDs. 30% of the souls on the street have means. They're just not able to access it. Not amazing? They're just not able to access it because they don't have the mental acuity, the ID or whatever the case may be. We build the means. Portland Street Medicine, now we're addressing their needs every night because Captain Starling is sending PSR or chat, or worst case scenario, we're sending an engine to address a scrape or some sort of mental illness because he's getting called to mental illness acuity issues, right? But if we're able to make sure people are sleeping every single night, they're getting fed every single night, and you have a doctor there every night, oh my goodness, the call volume will plummet, Chris. You'll be focused on saving souls that need saving instead of bypassing response times. And this is our thing to the police. TriMet Day Pass. You can TriMet Day Pass every day if you're in the shelter. You're not. We're not giving you a month pass for coming in one night. It's every day because we want to see you back here tonight because we want to solve whatever your root cause is. We want to give you a bridge to that solution to keep you safe tonight, right? So we're tying that in just for success. I'm working with Goodwill. I'm working with the CEO saying, hey man, I want daily vouchers. $5 daily voucher if you show up at a pop-up community shelter. Stay there 5 days, you get $25. Stay there 10 days, you get 50. And you're building your wardrobe because you're going to look sharp, right? You're going to be cared for. And that's, if you read that Amsterdam, you'll see they make sure every day one of their, I was in Amsterdam a few weeks ago. They make sure every homeless person that walks out is well clothed, warmed, and they're walking out with clean clothes. Dignity. Let's instill dignity in these individuals. You know, we're not even giving them basic needs in life, like look sharp, feel sharp, get some sleep. Storage units. We have more storage units in town. Do you know? It drives me nuts. And you know, it's $65 a month for a 10 by 10. We can provide a storage unit for somebody who just lost their house. Once you lose your past, you lose your future. Lose your photos. You become nobody. And that's what these individuals. So let's install dignity. So God forbid you are going to, if tomorrow you end up homeless and you've got your gear, you move that gear onto the multi-youth path. Within 1 week, it's gone.
Yeah.
You're homeless. You go to a community pop-up shelter. I'm homeless. I've got my stuff right here. Here's your voucher. Go down to this public storage unit and immediately secure your gear. And now it gives you an opportunity to keep your connection to your past so you can move to your future. Just because you lost your house doesn't mean you should lose your life. And that just happens to everybody. Hey, now we've got counseling. Homeless court program, I told you about that. It's very effective. That's my hope. Really like it because you got to remove a person's past to get them to the future. So, 2 slides left. So I went to LA because Dan Ryan's Safe Rest. Dan is a high school buddy of mine. Dan and I came here a year ago. Love Dan. Working his tail off for you, I promise. Is he making mistakes? You bet. Has he done this before? Yeah. But give him 5 years. Guy's going to be magic, I promise. But he busted his tail to get the Safe Rest Villages done, right? Some of you are say, well, it's not a solution. No, it's not the solution, but it's a step forward. So while he was developing this, I went down to LA and I met with the mayor of Skid Row because I wanted to know, General Jeff, do Safe Rest Villages work? Because they're using them in LA. And he said, Keith, what are you talking about? Stop that. He says, homelessness is about having a whole host of options. Think about it as a restaurant. If you have one restaurant in Portland and they sell crappy food, is anybody going to want to go into it? He says, think about home solutions as 10 different choices. He says, Safe Rest Villages are just one. It's like a menu. Give people a choice. If you don't give them a choice, they're generally not going to move to services, right? Here's the thing about this. When I called him up to wish him Merry Christmas this December, he died. He died 2 months after my visit. Because that's what happens. He at least lived to be 57, 56. Do you see where I'm going with this? A friend of mine, my God, living on the streets, helping me help others, said to me, Keith, you better get a hold of it now. Because I told him, we have 2,000 homeless. He said, well, we got 60,000. He says, and he said this as a cautionary tale. You better get a hold of this now before you become LA. If that doesn't raise goosebumps, I don't know what is. And then he died 60 days later. For Pete's sake, could I even make it more profound of a point as my second to last slide? So together we can end unsheltered homelessness. But here's my trade-off, and here's what I want you to ask questions, but I'm being very specific with you. Are you willing to provide your churches? There are 517 of them in town, and I'm meeting with as many that will let me talk to their congregations. But in turn, Matt, I want to give him $5,000 a month. That's nothing. I'm telling you, that is nothing. That $9.35 I put in there per day, built in giving him $5,000 because he wants to be benevolent. It's only $6.61. But I want to give him at least $3 per person per day to save my brother, to save my sister, right? $9.35. That's all I'm asking. 517 churches and their congregants, the numbers have been trending down. They're these wonderful assets and are wonderful community benefits to us. And in Athens, that's how they take care of their homeless. The houses of peace, they're all Greek Orthodox church there. They take care of all. They won't let anybody sleep on the street at all, ever. Community centers, we have 12 of them. And we did this through the pandemic. They made them 24 hours and they shut you out. What I'm saying is, are you willing to give up your Mount Scott Community Center from 9 p.m. to 7 when nobody goes there and allow people to live on the gym floor and to borrow the shower at midnight, to take a shower so they can feel dignity-based and go to work their next day without having their stuff stolen? Are you willing to let your community center be used as a community center? Are you willing to do that? Are we willing to let Barry Manash, who owns one of the biggest owners of property in Portland, use his underutilized facilities to become homeless shelters only at night so he can get a tax break? So yeah, Barry, you can get a tax break. I met with him. Because he wants to give his empty buildings that are underpurposed or underutilized to just end homelessness, because his numbers in Portland are plummeting. Nobody wants to rent his sky rises. It's a business decision. He says, end homelessness, and I stabilize my business because I'm losing property value. And I'll give it to you for free, Keith. And then I'm going to need your help to volunteer at these. Do you know what NET teams are? Neighborhood emergency teams? I'm a NET team. There's 3,000 of those souls. And I keep asking, I'm going to need your help. Because we're going to have to set up 3,000 beds, knowing that within 3 months, it'll go down to 1,000. And then it'll go to 500. And then it'll go to 100. But we have to set up these 3,000 cots and mats at every available space. We only need 30 of them.
But you tear them down every night?
Every night, because we don't want to build structures at all, ever. Most emergency shelters close during the day anyways, because we want to move that homeless person to repairing their lives. There are 300 homeless services during the day. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
We have 12 shelters at night. We are so upside down in our city. We're happy to have an 8 to 5 job to take care of our homeless services, but they're on their own at night, and we're throwing them out to the wolves. Do you understand how upside down that is? It's called an emergency shelter. I say that's the biggest misnomer there is. There's nothing about an emergency shelter, because our emergency shelters in town, you know, let me just, and then I'll end this, and I want to, before you, look at these numbers. So this is called, our emergency shelters, only 34% of them, you don't, 66% you have to have a reservation.
Yeah.
For an emergency shelter. Do you understand that term? What's emergency about it? The new, the one on Denver and Lombard, it's a 100-soul emergency shelter. Day they opened, they had 250 on the wait list. Is that really an emergency shelter? I'd like to change the term. There's nothing emergency. If I show up, come back in a month. Are you kidding me? I don't have an emergency in a month. I might be dead. So I call it pop-up community shelters because it's up to us to do it. So I'm saying, so now that was a lot of information and I'm done. So what I want to say is just simply, can't we just provide a safe place for people to live at almost no cost tonight? Because if I involve Matt and his community, which I'm going to talk to all 517 churches, we need to go to our electeds and say, we need your community centers, do it again, right? But I promise you, if we set these 30 places up at 100 souls each, I know based on what I've learned from Mayor Beater, and what I've learned when we cleared Lowerhurst Park, 2/3 are just going to go away. I know this because Portland has the highest homeless upon arrival rate in the nation. I know that. You know that. It's going to go away. I'm not making that up. You know common decency based on what these experts have told me, and I'm just regurgitating to you. We can end unsheltered homelessness within months. But we got to work to go ahead.
So when you say that, there's some pieces missing for me.
Yeah.
So you've already said people come here because there's no punitive results for their drug use or whatever. Okay, so, I mean, there's so many pieces that have to fit together.
Yes.
You know, I mean, how are these pop-up shelters going to solve the problem within a few months? I've served in that shelter too. I saw pretty rough things there that night. And I don't think their lives were changed because they were there that night. Glad to, just give that cup of cold water, call it, that we'll do that. But, I mean, I'm hearing you saying that things are going to change for these people. It's like, I'm not quite understanding how.
Well,
I know that 2/3 are going to leave, and then we've got this third that we're going to, how are we going to work to improve their lives?
Nice. I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So, let's talk about the day-to-day part. When somebody lives in a tent and is in survival mode, they will do the most irrational things, whether it's property crime, drugs, or whatnot. We can't allow people in the tent at all, ever.
So, and I get that. I totally 100% agree. Who's going to tell them they can't? I mean, are police all of a sudden going to be able to tell them they can no longer?
Great question. We're going to have to enforce our codes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
it.
Who's coordinating all of that to happen at one time within those few months?
The question is more planning. I love it. So let me just do that linear approach. So on day one, when we recognize we're going to set up pop-up community shelters, it's going to take at least 90 days because we have an emergency. Think about FEMA. They come in, they set up their units almost overnight because the hurricane just happened. Same sort of methodology. We go to these, and I've already started taking lists. I've already got a long list of people who are going to give shelters, right? Matt's one of them, and I'm presenting to another. So we get these 30 locations set up. We engage our net. We engage volunteers. Now let's say that we don't have enough to staff them at night. Now we're going to go to temp services because that's what I've learned at the severe winter shelters. Those are temp individuals. If the Molco in Portland doesn't answer the call at time and a half to come over to the shelter, they just hire temp services. Now that's the granular approach. So we're going to staff it. It's going to take 90. It's going to take 180 days. We need them all to be tested. Hey everybody, we have 3,000 beds ready today. Remember what I said about Dave Beater? He said, I need 250 beds. Get them set up now because there's the 250 souls that need them. We set up 3,000 beds because we have to have 3,000 beds because the law requires us. An officer cannot engage and say, you're not allowed to camp here right now.
Unless there's a place to go.
Unless there's a place to go. That camper's going to say, forgive me, I'm looking at you. I shouldn't do, I'll look at the chair.
You can look at me.
You have, next Tuesday is our 0 day. Everybody in Portland, there's somewhere to go tonight. And then the officer and the fire, and then we slowly start, hey man, you're going to have to move. Sorry. There's a place at the Mount Scott, that's your closest one, that's a mile away, but you can go to any of them. You can go to Church of Nazarene. You can go downtown, you can go to St. Philip Neri on Division. You can go wherever you want, because here's the 30 structures in every community. Because I know it's developed. We could start in the Lents area and start moving, but what you're doing if you don't start en masse all at once, you're just going to push all the people from Lents to downtown. And that's not what it's all about. We have to do it. Did that make sense though? That's more of a mechanical question. It can be done, but the police are going to get engaged because our codes are clear. Camping has never been a part of our law, right?
So the city leaders are going to Whoever.
Yes.
Yeah.
They all know what I'm working on, by the way.
Okay, all right, thanks.
But again,
Sorry, I just don't
it's
know
really
what
up to
it
you.
is.
Keep in mind, the grass tops know this can be done. We're the grassroots. We need to rise up and say there are solutions. I listened to Keith Wilson the other day, and he said we can end homelessness in a matter of months. And I go, what? And Mayor Willer would tell me another excuse, and I'll give him another solution. I do these videos, and I send it to him. Mayor Willer, here's my latest one at Matt House. They know what we're working on, you guys. Mingus called me, Commissioner Maps called me the other day. I said, Commissioner Maps, he said he wanted to know about two things, homelessness and emissions, which I work a lot with emissions. I'm a trucking company. We use no fossil fuels in Oregon. So I've earned two National Innovator Awards this year. What I'm telling you is not, we can pull this off, right? Commissioner Maps, I said, Commissioner Maps, I got an idea that could help you get 2,000 souls housed immediately. He's like, really? So I talked to him a little about it, then we go on to emissions, but nothing happened. It's gonna take us based on how we vote. And then also, when you see Commissioner Maps, which Shar has Dan here again, who's a good friend of mine. Dan kind of knows what I'm working on. But when Commissioner Maps just said, well, have you heard about that? Pop-up community shelters, we should be doing it. Once they hear it again and again and again, they're gonna follow you. They're not gonna follow themselves. Do you understand how that populist and populism works? Unfortunately, it's up to us to do this. So
The leaders saying you cannot camp here, you have these options, period. I don't see this happening. I mean,
You hit it on the head.
I don't want to down, because I know your staff and your research and everything that you've done is just amazing.
Are you amazed by these numbers, though?
I am. I'm
Do you know
shocked by
your
it.
electeds don't even know these numbers? So our
They
job.
don't even gather the data
They
to
don't.
understand
So
the numbers.
they're going to, though. So
But
every
they
time I
say
talk
that they've
to,
been saying
I know.
that a long time.
I know. So-
And we are here in Lents have, well,
Oh,
you
you
can
poor
see it
people
gathering
here.
back
You-
up on
yeah.
map again.
Yeah.
You can see it gathering
I
back
do.
on 92nd again. And we are the ones that have to, watch it every single day.
So let me ask you all a question, and then we'll ask some more questions as you start to leave. So I want hands raised on this one. And I asked you that question. And this is a question I asked because you said, I don't see it. Here, let me go back. Because I want to be clear, and I need to know what your ideas are and such. I'm going to go backwards. Great computer, by the way, Shar.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
working great.
That's good. I'm glad it's working.
So I want to ask, so let's be physical about it. I want to know if you're all in or if you're not. Is it just bullets and it'll never work? Or are you willing to give up what's in your community at no cost to you other than just allowing your churches and your community centers to be used at night to save lives? Hands high. Will you accept that? No?
I'm
Ambivalent?
We don't have any trust, Keith.
What's that?
We don't have any trust.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I wanted to do is say, it's going to take us to allow, because there's a lot of NIMBY. No, let that happen in North Portland or Northeast. In Lents, you are being afflicted more than any community in the entire state. We should be going hands high on this. My point to you is, this is the first time I've asked you that. Char will invite me back in a year's time. If it hasn't ended, I'm going to come back in a year's time. I'm going to run for office again. Because if our elected leaders won't do it, then one of us is going to have to do it.
That's right.
Do you understand that? So, but I want you guys to go hands high now. What are you doing? I just heard about a solution that will work. You know, my wife doesn't want me to run. But my point is that our outcomes are certainly not meeting our expectations today.
Absolutely.
And I've lost my city. I can't recognize my city anymore. And so my point is what decent civilization allows our neighbors to die at our feet on a nightly basis? I can't take it anymore. I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, and I'm not going to allow our community to really beat down the downtrodden as what is happening right now. Drugs or not, we can do better. But I'm gonna need your help. And that's why I said the trade-off is we're not gonna spend millions and billions building structures that aren't gonna help our community. And hard-walled shelters help nobody. We have 2,000 shelter beds right now. Almost more than any city in the United States on a per capita basis. They don't work, right?
Do you think it's important to understand where the person is coming from? Even though you're housing them and you're doing these pop-up shelters, I think it's important to discover like what's happening with that person. What is their
Good.
They need social skills, and they're living in this just zone of like day-to-day panic, basically.
Go ahead, Matt.
And so that's a question I have. And how can they be successful at just giving a pop-up one night? You know.
So what we did at the church this year, you probably volunteered when we did it with the county, and it was chaos.
Yes.
It was absolute chaos.
Okay.
Now that we're working with Union Gospel Mission, we have paid staff, so it's not volunteers,
Okay.
which changed the consistency.
Sure.
Some of the rules changed. But anyway, so what we ended up with were, if you came one night, you were guaranteed to be at the front of the line the next night, right? So basically, if you came every night, you had a guaranteed bed all winter long. So I would say half or 3/4 of the people that stayed at the church this winter, we did it for 7 months this year. So from November to June 1st, I think is what we did. And we had the same staff there every night. So those regular people that came every night got to know the staff and built those relationships. And it took weeks, months before they still felt comfortable enough to like actually have a conversation. But we were able to connect people with family members. We were able to transition people into like detox or refer people to other treatment centers.
And who's the we that did that?
Union Gospel Mission.
Okay.
And the staff.
Okay.
So we have, in partnership with Union Gospel Mission, we have a case manager that works from our church.
Okay.
And so she was a big pioneer for that because then she was there during the day. So she would meet with them at night and talk with them and love on them and everything. And then she would say, if you're really interested in this, come see me tomorrow. And then they would come to the church and she would help get them into detox, or some of them moved into the village or whatever. And the regulars that came, most of them had jobs but couldn't afford a place to stay. There was a lady that was just on the news because of our shelter and stuff. She just got into a place. So like that consistency, we were able to meet that need. We still had, unfortunately, we had somebody die in our shelter this year. We don't know why exactly. We assume it was a drug overdose, but we don't know. But we were able then to connect with like bigger picture, I guess. This gentleman lived in New York. He came here from New York or something like that. So we were able to like find his family and kind of end that whole question mark of where he was. So just that consistency and that seeing the same face every single night and having the paid staff. So like when I think of these pop-up shelters, I'm thinking it's not going to change the people that stay there immediately, but now you have a chance to build a relationship, and that caseworker doesn't have to go to a campsite that's been moved. They go to the church or the community center where they know that person's been staying, and they can build that ongoing relationship. Honestly, they didn't bring it.
Really?
Some of them brought carts and just parked them in the front doors of the church. A lot of them have cars and just left it in their car. And it's funny, most of them have storage units. Most of the people that come to us for services have a storage unit. Like when they move into the village, we say, keep your storage unit, because you can't unload your whole storage unit into our little tiny houses. But most people have storage units.
Matt, is that low barrier?
Which thing?
What you were talking about?
So the shelter, the winter shelter is low barrier. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of low barrier. So we don't drug test or breathalyze anybody, but there is a check-in process and everybody has their picture taken and they're given like a little mission ID if they don't have an ID, and they have to present that every night. And then there's some medical questions as far as like TB and that kind of stuff that not every shelter does. So, but they can come in drunk or high as long as their behavior doesn't cause issues. But if they begin to cause issues, we ask them to leave. And it's not a revolving door, so once you leave, you're out. You can't come back in that night. And if it's aggressive enough, usually if it was violent, we tell them they can't come back until they meet with myself or somebody to figure out what was going on. But if it was just like a minor behavior thing, they can come back, but it just depends on the situation.
So are you thinking these other pop-up shelters that you're trying to get, are they gonna all partner with somebody like Union Gospel Mission who can staff and help?
Probably.
Okay.
Because the city has a way of just not being able to support things in a fiscally conservative way, right? It tends to get so blown out that
Yes.
a Safe Rest Village, $16 million for four
Yeah, I
sites.
was here when Dan talked about that.
Yeah, so, but that's why I put that price up there, because I'm like, wow, you know, it's like if we get maybe a private operator, they generally can do a lot more with a lot less. But I do want the private operators to pay well. They should at least support $17,
Like
you
UGM
know.
comes with most of those services
Yep.
built in. Like they have an outreach team,
Yeah.
they have medical, they do the day passes for the bus tickets. Like, you know what I mean? Like UGM comes with that.
You know, I don't like saying, well, here's how I think it will work, because I want to be very direct with you. Because I want you to think of the worst case scenario, because then if we under-promise and over-deliver, you're happy. The city has a way of over-promising and under-delivering, and then we're not happy. That's why I say, here's the trade-off. Here's the worst case scenario. Here's your community center. I really want it to be visceral, but I do want you to know two things. First of all, what I've presented is only about 70% going to work, because no big plan. What did Eisenhower say? He says, plans are worthless, planning is indispensable. Because he knows once he pulls into the battle plan, when you get in the fog of war, nobody follows the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the training and the planning that you've done beforehand that's going to allow you to win that battle. So my point is, this is only a plan. It's not going to work, but I bet you 70% does. And 30% I can fix. And then again, if I put in a fix for that 30%, and I'm only 70% right, now I'm 21% more right. I'm almost to 90%. It's about planning. We're in paralysis right now. Nobody would do anything. And our commissioners are nervous to lose their jobs. And so they do what we really don't like is nothing, and then we throw them out anyways, right? It's like, dude, we're okay if somebody makes a mistake.
Yeah.
What we're not okay with is just paralysis, and that's where we're at right now, right? So I do want you to know, yes, this is not going to succeed as written, but I'm smart enough to know that I didn't get Innovator of the Year awards for not trying something. I failed a lot more than I succeeded, but I really learned a lot in that failure to fix it. Now we're talking about the community center. I don't want to use them, but I know all I need is 30 of these units to set up to end unsheltered homelessness. And on day one, only 10 of them are actually going to be used. So, but after 30 days, after they're empty, and there's only 10 people on the gym floor at the Mount Scott, and there's only 30 people at the Charles Jordan, we start consolidating, right? We start closing on them. Because if I'm excess capacity of 2,000 beds, we're not going to keep that shelter open, right? We want shelter beds with 50 or 60 souls per unit, like at Matt's place. We don't need them. We don't want them at 100, but 50 or 60. We want our outreach people to be able to be fully effective, and you're only going to do that if you have 50 or 60 there. If there's only 5 guys at this one shelter, hey, we're over capacity, right? But guess what happens when an earthquake occurs in Portland? Are we ready? Are we ready to ramp up for an emergency when you need it? Or I need it? Now we're truly ready for a disaster, for a humanitarian crisis, and we're practiced, and we have the system ready to go. Go ahead.
Oh, no, just
It is 8:30. I really appreciate your time. You can I'm going to stay, and you got questions, but I know you have places to be, and you've been very courteous to this, but I'm going to stay and answer questions.
Oh, I was just going to ask, could your presentation be available so we could get it?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I'll put it, when
Sure.
I upload the video, I'll put his presentation.
Thank you all.